I'm Melody Dumay, curator of Chinese collections and the International Dunhuang project at the British Library. Thank you very much for joining us today for what is sadly the last talk of the Georgetown IDP Lecture Series following the Silk Roads to North America. And the series has been generously funded by the Henry Luce Foundation. So I really can't believe how quickly this series has unfolded. And for those of you who weren't able to attend previous lectures, worry not, because they will be made available online on the IDP YouTube channel. I think a few people in the audience have been following us from the start, but for those of you who are joining us for the first time, I wanted to give you a bit of background about the project and this series. So the goal of the lecture series is to celebrate the upcoming completion of the Georgetown IDP North American Silk Road Collections Project, which has been supervised jointly by Michelle Wang at Georgetown University and the International Dunhuang Project, IDP, at the British Library. So the Georgetown IDP North American Collections Project has been managed by Dr. Miki Morita since 2016, and it has been supported by the Henry Luce Foundation and the Dunhuang Foundation, who we wanted to thank warmly for their support. The project will virtually bring together Silk Road manuscripts and artifacts that are dispersed in North American institutions by incorporating them into the IDP's public database and website. So today, I am delighted to welcome Dr. Fan Jeremy Zhang for a lecture focusing on the Eastern Silk Road holdings in the collections of the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. So Dr. Fan Jeremy Zhang is the Barbara and Gerson Bacow Curator of Chinese Art and head of the Chinese Department at the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. He holds a PhD from Brown University and an MA from Vanderbilt University, both in the history of art. He was trained as an archaeologist at Kublai Khan's Xanadu in Inner Mongolia, and previously served as the Asian art curator at the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art and the Smith College Museum of Art, and held research positions at the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Field Museum. The presentation will be followed by a Q&A session, so send any questions you may have during the talk or at the end of the talk via the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of the screen. And so it's now my honor to hand over to Dr. Fan Jeremy Zhang.
Thank you, Melody, for introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to talk in the International Dunhuang project. Due to various reasons, many objects from Dunhuang and other archaeological sites along the Silk Road were scattered around the world. I really appreciate the support from the British Library and Georgetown University so that we can have this series of surveys on the Silk Road objects in the public and private museums in the US. My talk today emphasizes the spread of Buddhist art in China and examines the rich religious and cultural activities in the eastern portion of the Silk Road, from the Han to the Yuan dynasty. I have selected 10 objects from the collection of the Asian Art Museum, including textile paintings from Mogao Caves in Dunhuang and mural fragments from Kucha. I will map them based on their original sites in chronological order so that we can discuss histories and features of these artworks in a larger context and understand how artistic exchanges and cultural interactions provided endless streams of inspiration for the development and innovation of Chinese art. Okay, the Silk Road is a vast network of trade routes that connected the ancient Mediterranean world and East Asia. When we talk about the Silk Road in a broad sense, I would like to emphasize it is not a single route, but a complex network of countless short routes that eventually expanded throughout the vast Eurasia. I really like this map because it uses different colors to highlight three different kinds of routes. The red ones refer to the conventional land routes crossed mountains and deserts, derived from the Han to the Yuan dynasty. The green one on the top means the steppe route on vast grassland, and it reached its peak during the Mongol Yuan Empire under the Pax Mongolia. The blue ones on the bottom represent the sea trade routes that thrived since the Southern Song period, after the wide use of compass in voyages. It attained the apex in the 4020s as Admiral Zheng He's fleets reached East Africa. As this map shows, our talk focuses on the eastern portion of the conventional land route. I want to highlight 2 points for a better understanding of the Silk Road network. First, the traffic is not one-way only, but in multiple directions. Silk is not the only product. Tea and ceramics were also sold to the west, while jewelry, gold, wools, and incense were sent back to the east. In addition to silk and other goods, religious beliefs and cultural values were also spread along the roads. Merchants and envoys traveled for commercial and political purposes, while pilgrims and monks traveled for religious goals. The journey along the Silk Roads were full of hardships and difficulties, and many regions often blocked the free traffic for various reasons. Camels were the major vehicles for the caravans of the time because they could cross the deserts and carry heavy loads of goods without drinking water for days. This large piece represents a vivid example of the two-humped Bactrian camel from Central Asia, and you can see what a traveler would carry for their long journey. Besides the packages of goods, food, and water, they often carry wine and musical instruments for entertainment. The detail shows a bird-headed wine ewer attached to the saddle, and this vessel type is introduced from the Sasanian Persian world. The vivid colors of the loaded bags represent a famous stylistic advancement of Chinese ceramic production around 700, the application of 3-color glazed technique. This term refers to the 3 dominant mirror-based colors in the Santai earthenware, including iron oxide for amber and yellow, copper oxide for green, and cobalt for blue. The splendid mix of various colors also suggests a new taste in ceramic aesthetics, different from the old monochrome preference, which possibly developed among Chinese elites under the influence of colorful textiles imported from Central Asia. From this vivid representation of Central and Western Asian figures, we learned about how peoples of the West regions were viewed in ancient China. Some cottonists were known as savvy businessmen. Some Sogdians were known for their war dances, and some Uyghurs were skillful vendors of grape wine. In particular, the hobby of drinking grape wine was introduced to China through the Silk Road, along with new vessel types such as the arrow-shaped vases and stamped cups from the West. Among the earliest surviving artworks from the Silk Roads are religious images and votive icons carried by travelers. Traditionally, most attention was given to the spread of Buddhism, which was introduced from India to China. You can see on this Silk Road map that India stayed in the middle, and it is connected to mainland China, either through Central Asia and Xinjiang in the northern routes, or through Burma and Yunnan in the southern routes. The first 2 objects of the 10 items I selected from the collection are the money tree from ancient Sichuan of the 2nd century and the seated Buddha dated 338. They both appeared in the first few hundred years after the arrival of Buddhism in China. The former is possibly associated with the southern route, and the latter suggests the northern route, while the western regions, or modern-day Xinjiang. The money tree is a popular object from Eastern Han tombs in Sichuan province of southwestern China. They offer a fascinating glimpse into the mix of local and imported beliefs on the afterlife and heaven. The replicas of coins that grow from the tree branches symbolize wishes for abundance and good fortune in the afterlife. The money trees were also placed in a tomb as a ladder to reach heaven, with the hope that the deceased would be able to enter the paradise of the Queen Mother of the West, or Xiwamu. Here you can see the main figure near the top. Is the Queen Mother, a deity in charge of the paradise of Mount Kunlun in the west. As the detail here shows, she sits on a throne supported by a dragon and a tiger. Farther down is the tree trunk, is the seated Buddha right underneath the portal to heaven, guarded by two celestial warriors. Interestingly, the newly introduced Buddha, the main deity in Buddhism, was merely treated as a minor deity or a doorkeeper, so that he could be easily accepted into the native pantheon of among local believers. Given that most of them are found in Sichuan, close to the southwest border of China, the money tree suggests that Buddhism was partially transmitted via the tea trade routes from Southeast Asia. But this seated statue, found in northern Hebei province, suggests the spread of Buddhism via the northern routes. It is the earliest known dated Buddha sculpture produced in China, with an inscription on its base mentioning the year 338. This date is about 400 years after Buddhism was first introduced to China. It is also among the largest bronze sculptures to have survived from the early 1st century, when Chinese Buddha images were heavily influenced by ancient Gandharan art in modern Pakistan, Afghanistan, and northern India. The figure's arrangement, with legs crossed and set on a rectangular pedestal, is probably modeled after a Gandharian prototype brought to China via the Silk Road. The inscription indicates the statue belonged to the later Zhao state, a kingdom founded by a nomadic people who controlled most part of northern China. It was in this kingdom where Buddhism became a state-sponsored, widespread religion after being a minority religion for hundreds of years. To obtain Buddha's blessings, non-Han nobles commissioned the building of large-scale temples, the construction of painted grottos, and the mass production of Buddhist statues. More importantly, the Chinese characteristics make this statue an important milestone of the signification in the development of Buddhist art in China. His face, hairstyle, and robe throne have been adapted according to the Chinese preference to attract native devotees. For instance, this Buddha lacks mustache, and his overlapping inward-facing palms were adopted from a former Taoist gesture of reverence. It is important to note that this Buddha statue does not stand alone, but comes from an assembled altar shrine. The statue was once adorned with a canopy, a halo, and other ornaments, and seated on a four-legged platform. From a similar but smaller niche found in the same province, we know how the original set looked like. This kind of niche represents the early Chinese adaptation of the imported Gandharan prototypes to cater to the taste of local believers. we could find more possible prototypes further towards the west, including small wooden carvings of seated Buddhas from the lowland side in the Tarimu Desert and smaller niches in Gansu, the corridor connecting the western regions with China's mainland. The first century is a crucial moment for the rise of Buddhist art in China. The social and political chaos and the invasions of nomadic peoples resulted in the rapid spread of Buddhism among various ethnic groups, who all sought spiritual salvation and a better afterlife. The statue was commissioned by an Indian monk who was possibly in the circle of Votive, a famous Central Asian monk, promoted Buddhism at the court of later Zhao. Votive arrived Luoyang in 310, preaching the Buddhist faith and singing convoys. He was trusted by later Zhao rulers such as a miraculous master and served as their principal religious counsel and military advisor. Interestingly, an early Tang Dynasty mural from Dunhuang Cave 323 recorded Votive's miracles, and here is the overview of the painted north wall. Several Buddhist stories are illustrated on the top of the wall and marked with titles in cartouches. Before we examine Votive's miracles on the right, let's first look at an interesting story about the origin of Buddhism in China. It is said that Emperor Wu Di of the Western Han wanted to know who were the two mysterious golden statues sheltered in his palace. So he commissioned Zhang Qian to find it out. On the bottom, we see Zhang Qian said goodbye to the emperor who seated on the horse to start his long journey to the west. And this event led to the start of the Silk Road traffic. Although the story messed up different historical events and pushed the arrival of Buddhism in China a couple of hundred years earlier, we know how Tang people of the 7th century understood the origin of Buddhism in China. Here are the stories of the legendary monk Votive, who could cure various diseases and tell people's mind by simply looking at their faces. Plus, 3 miracles are illustrated here. At the upper right corner, Votive correctly predicted the result of a crucial battle simply by listening to the bell sound on a pagoda. In the middle, Votive performed his miracle to stop a large fire far away merely by splashing a cup of water in the air before the emperor in a banquet. At the bottom, the monk shows his ability to fast for a long time and then open his belly to wash and cleaning his intestines. No wonder these amazing activities impressed the non-Han Chinese ruler Shihu, who would be fully devoted to Buddhism and supporting the spread of Buddhist art in his kingdom. This map marks the origins of 2 other works in our collection. One is the wooden statue of a bodhisattva, and the other is a mural fragment of a Buddhist figure, both from the prosperous Buddhist Kucha kingdom or Qiuzi kingdom on the northern rim of the Tarimu Basin during the 6th and 7th centuries. This small wooden figurine renders a standing bodhisattva and the tiny seated Buddha on his diadem suggests the identity of the deities Guan Yin, the bodhisattva of compassion. The radiating lines in the halo and the legs emerging from the robe suggest the statue came from an oasis state in the northern rim of the Tarimu Desert. Buddhist figurines from this region of Xinjiang are normally small, with the height under 20 centimeters and made of poplar or elm tree wood. Large pieces are mainly architectural ornaments and statues in local monasteries. I also want to show the map of modern Xinjiang so that you can have a better understanding of the geographical feature of this region. Buddhism spread from Central Asia through regions in Afghanistan to China. And you can see there are northern routes and southern routes along the Tamil Basin. And then travelers would either cross the Tianshan Mountains or go further along the northern routes to reach Turfan, an important stop on the Silk Road, and then Dunhuang before they entering the Heshi corridor that connecting the western regions of modern-day Xinjiang to the central plains of China. This prosperous city used to be a favorite stopping place for caravans and pilgrims during the 7th century. It was also a flourishing center of Buddhist studies and had one of the largest monastic communities in Central Asia, with more than 1,000 stupas. The caves of Kucha and the surrounding sites were once filled with wall paintings and statues. This map shows several Buddhist grottos in the Kucha region or ancient Chouzi Kingdom, scattered along the mouth of the Kucha Gouge of the Tianshan Mountains. From the inscription on the back of the mural fragment, we know this piece was cut from Simsim near Kiri's high cave in the mouth of the gorge. The photo shows how the Simsim Caves look like today, which are about 100 kilometers away from the famous Khizir Caves in Kucha. This mural fragment shows a figure's head framed with curly black hair and a halo with black border. It was found in 1913 by the German archaeologist Albert van der Kerk on his first expedition to Central Asia. Van der Kerk was employed by the Ethnological Museum of Berlin and helped plan and organize several expeditions to Xinjiang in the 1900s. This fragment was a gift presented by him to the father of the donor. Similar gifts of mural fragments from the same trip are in other museums today, such as the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. Although it is the only small fragment, the image clearly embodies the renowned mural technique of Kucha. The detail clearly shows the figure's face, with arching eyebrows and lips placed close to the nose. Just in a few vital brush strokes, the red shading around the lips, the eyes, nose, and the chin give depth and volume to vivid facial features. This painting technique is so different from that of traditional Chinese ink art. This and other mural fragments from Kucha remind us of the style of Yu Yisheng, a famous Central Asia painter who was known for his techniques of chiaroscuro, or using light and shadow, in Buddhist and exotic portraits. He was born from northern Afghanistan or the Khotan region and served as the Tang court during the second half of the 7th century. He brought a new painting style of Iranian origin that highlight volume and shadow, and also known for using iron wire, a smooth, accurate line of unvarying thickness to outline figures in paintings. Here, I would like to show a horizontal scroll depicts a procession of foreign envoys presenting tribute tours to Chinese imperial court, and such images served as a historical record of diplomatic link between China and the West. And the technique started from the Kucha mural painters and introduced by Yu Yisheng, also seen on this long hand scroll. On this map, you will see items numbers 5 to 7, dated to the 8th to the 10th century. These works are from the sites in the Turfan region. After the next major stop after leaving the Tarimu Basin and crossed the Tianshan Mountains. They include fragments of writing documents from Gaochang County when it was ruled by Tang Empire during the 8th century, a Buddhist plaque from the Buddhist Gaochang Kingdom when the Uyghurs occupied the area after 800, and a Buddhist banner painting from Dunhuang, the last stronghold of Tang Empire at the western end of the Heshi Corridor. A group of 6 fragments of writing documents, including a deed of farmland, a household registration, and some letters, were found in a jar. They were buried in a hurry together with some wheat and eggs. The owner purposefully buried these important documents and food when some emergency occurred, but never got a chance to retrieve them. These documents reflect local life at a fort in Gaochang, which became colonized by the Tang troops and farmers since 640. During the height of Tang Empire, its army occupied Xinjiang and part of Central Asia to maintain the thriving or prosperity of the Silk Road trade. 2 documents are dated from the 720s, the heydays of the empire, while the other dates to 793, right before the Uyghurs occupied the area and blocked the Silk Road traffic. Because of the constant challenges from Tibetan and the Uyghur armies, the Tang Empire started to lose its dominance in the western region. In 840, the Tang government lost its very last prefecture in the western regions and stopped the direct contact with the Arabic kingdoms that controlled most West and Central Asia. The Silk Road soon started declined. Purchased from the Ashkenazi in London, this rectangular iron plaque renders a standing Buddha and his halos with lines of silver and gold inlay. Apparently, this valuable artwork was made in a region lack of copper or bronze, or people will not make this important piece with cheap material as iron. I suspect the date of this piece is after 840, when the Chinese states restricted the export of metal to border regions after Uyghurs ruled that area. The image of the Buddha is shown in 3/4 view and bears a striking resemblance to Buddhist images of the Pure Land sect that spread in East Asia. Here is a similar 14th century Japanese painting that depicts the Buddha Amitabha, who is ready to come down to earth to take the soul of newly deceased person back to the Western paradise. This kind of painting was widely commissioned by Chinese, Japanese, and Korean devotees of Pure Land Buddhism. This comparison also shows some similarities between this Buddha image and a 12th century Shisha panel painting of the descent of Buddha Amitabha, who welcomes and guides the souls of the deceased to the Western paradise. But I would like to say these mural images show much similarities to our plaque piece. Plaque piece, and these murals are from the Basilic Cave of the Uyghur communities. The thin curved mustache of this Buddha is distinctly Central Asian, recalling the early Buddhist art of Gandhara. The aforementioned German archaeologist Albert von Leclerc cut many murals, including the whole walls, and moved them back to display at the Archaeological Museum of Berlin. But sadly, all these murals were destroyed during the British bombing of Berlin in 1944. Towards the end of the Tang Dynasty, as China's control over its western frontiers weakened, the Turkish Uyghurs and the non-Chinese Tankard Shisha arose along the Silk Road. These peoples became brokers for Chinese silk and Central Asia jade, as well as intermediaries in the increasing Buddhist exchanges among different peoples of Tibet, Central Asia, and China. Although we have identified the style and date of the metal plaque, the function of this plaque is still a myth. Several rectangular bronze plaques with Buddhist images were found during the 12th century, and they were used as plates to impress or imprint Buddha images on paper or other materials, as suggested by this metal front with images of Buddhas on one side. But our plaque has a flat back with no image. If compared to the clean front, the rusty back suggests this piece was once attached to the surface of some object or wall. We still are studying the possible function of this piece, but I want to show a gilded Buddhist plaque with engraved Buddha triad, dated to 947. The inscription on the back suggests it is one of the 16th panel of a set ornaments on a temple wall. The Mogao Caves, famous for their Buddhist shrines, sculptures, and wall paintings, are located in an oasis near the Dunhuang in the Gansu province. Dunhuang was a major hub for travelers on the Silk Road and became a major western border town of Tang and Song empires after they lost their direct control of the west regions. During the early 11th century, the newly rising Tanguard power occupied the Heshi corridor and further pushed the Chinese powers away from the west regions. The famous treasures from Dunhuang Caves were probably hidden in a suture cave sometime in the 1030s, possibly as a precaution against the approaching Tanguard army, and the owner never come back. This slide shows the interior of the famous Cave 45 of the Tang Dynasty, which represents the splendid artistic style during the heydays of Tang Empire. The assemblage of the Buddha and his companions, including 2 disciples, 2 bodhisattvas, and 2 guardians, marking the height of Tang sculpture. But the commercial hub Dunhuang declined, along with the Silk Road during the Mongol Yuan period, when the steppe routes became more important under the Pax Mongolia. The Mogao Caves were gradually forgotten in history. This painting showing on the left, which was executed on Remy Bast fiber, was discovered in the famous hidden trove of the Mogao Caves in 1900. French sinologist Paul Penniel came to Dunhuang in 1908 and purchased 10 truckloads of manuscripts from this trove. After his death, his wife sold some paintings from this trip, and this painting ended up at the collection of Asian Art Museum. This early representation of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, depicts him in a thin mustache and standing upright with each of his feet supported by a lotus blossom. His raised right hand carries a sprig of willow, with which he sprinkles the nectar of life from the bottle he holds in his left hand. A very detailed depiction of Tang Buddhist image. This map shows the last 3 items from the Asian Art Museum collection, including 2 13th century works, a Tanka scroll and a wine jar. Both are probably from a border city named Karakoto or Blackwater in the Shisha Tanguard Kingdom that controlled the traffic along the Heshi corridor. The religious painting of 14th century is possibly from Quanzhou, a port city of southern China that thrived during the Mongol Yuan and early Ming periods. Quanzhou became the latest UNESCO World Heritage Site of China about 2 months ago. In early 1900, Peter Kozlov, a Russian explorer, found Karakoto, the lost city buried in the Gobi Desert in northwestern China. When the Xixia Kingdom was destroyed by the Mongols in 1227, the people of the city managed to hide some of their treasures in a stupa, a monument enshrining the sacred remains of enlightened beings, which survived intact until Kozlov activated the site in 1908. They brought a large load of Buddha and Buddhist sutures, paintings, and sculpture back to Russia, and today the bulk of the material are in the State Heritage Museum in St. Petersburg, and you can take a look of those materials when you travel there. The tapestry tanga of Green Tara is probably from the lost Xixia Kingdom, which suggests a strong influence of Tibetan Buddhist art. This female deity's right arm is extended in a gesture of gift giving, while her right foot virtually steps out of the silk tapestry, a very rare Western Xia piece surviving today in the US collections. Here is another map to show the location of the Xixia Kingdom as a melting pot of Tibetan, Khitan, Central Asian, and Chinese influences. And the outstanding feature of this jar, a white unglazed band around the shoulder, distinguishes from other Chinese wells. And this feature has been identified as a treatment peculiar to Xixia jars. After glazing the entire body, a white circle of glaze was wheeled thrown off the shoulder. Well influenced by northern Chinese ceramics, kings of Xixia produced wells suitable from the nomadic styles from the north. Buddhism is not the only religion transmitted along the Silk Road, and we had other religions introduced to China. I just want to highlight one non-Buddhist artwork in our collection from the end of the Yuan dynasty. This banner painting has been treated as a Buddhist work for a long time, and no one knows exactly what it is about. But thanks to recent scholarship, we know it is a portion of a Manichaean painting of prophetology and features the birth of Mani, the founder of Manichaeism. To attract more believers, this ancient Persian religion combined elements from Zoroastrianism, Nestorian Christianity, and Buddhism. The comparison of our painting with the complete set titled The Sermon of Mani's Teaching of Salvation, a 13th century silk painting from a Japanese collection, enables us to learn about the content depicted in this painting. The Manichaeans still owned many believers in the port city of Quanzhou during the 14th century, even after the Silk Road declined and the influence of Islam dominated Central Asia and Xinjiang. Because of the destruction of the Silk Road on land, ocean trade began to thrive since the 13th century and reached a new height during the 14th century. This resulted in the rise of many port cities, such as Quanzhou, where many foreign communities lived and temples of Islam, Manichaeism, and Nestorian Christianity thrived. Admiral Zheng He's large fleets of the 4020s represents the apex of the Chinese exploration of the ocean routes, which reached the Near East and East Africa. But very soon, China turned inward and the ocean trade was restricted until the outbreak of the First Opium War in 1840, and this will be the topic of another talk. I hope our brief journey will allow you to have a better understanding of the artistic exchanges and cultural interactions along the Silk Roads, as demonstrated by the artworks and cultural relics likely surviving today. It was these products and ideas of humankind that provided endless inspiration for the development of Asian art and culture in the past 2 millennia. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your talk and for choosing such wonderful items to highlight the transmission of Buddhism from China, from the Western regions to China. So I think we've got a few questions from the audience. So if you don't mind, I'll first one is was actually asking who you think commissioned the early statues of the Buddha, whether it was monks or wealthy lay people.
A very good question. I think Asian Art Museum luckily owns one of the earliest dated Buddha image in Asia. And from the surviving inscription, even though it's partial, we know the commissioner is a monk because it's using the character Sen, and we know it's a monk. And also for those monks, if they came from India, they often had the surname Zhu, which is one character mark the ancient India. So we know this commissioner is a monk and a monk from India. At the early stage, those commissioners and the promoters of Buddhist art, most likely non-Chinese peoples, especially religious monks, and they supported the mass production of lots of Buddhist icons to promote the Buddhist teaching in different communities.
Thank you. Do you think the magic practiced by Fortudang and other monks was important in converting the Silk Road in China to Buddhism?
Yes, I believe so. Because for those Buddhist monks, they introduced some kind of miracles or magics that really attracted lots of low people as a part of the society, especially during a time of lots of chaos and troubles. And those people wish to receive some kind of outside help so that they could have a better life, if not in this world, at least in the next world. So that's why so many people converted to Buddhism with the hope that they could enter the Western paradise or the Buddhist heaven after this life. And I feel, especially in northern China during the first century, that's some kind of important or crucial moment, because China was broken into many different kingdoms and states, and the constant conflicts and wars among those states really created some kind of environment for the development of Buddhism. And also non-Chinese rulers used Buddhism, the outside religion, as a way to establish their rulership in local societies, because this kind of new foreign Buddhism changed the old social hierarchies and religious structure in local communities, and they would like to associate their identity with newly imported Buddhism to promote the rightness of their rulership.
Thank you very much. We've got also another question that is referring to the xixia, the tangut pot that you showed us, asking if anything was stored inside it. It's the pot from Karakoto.
Not in this jar we own, but I believe maybe in other cases, people often store things inside. And for this jar, it's a little special because we believe it is a wide vessel and the opening is quite narrow, so it's hard to put things inside. But for other kinds of jar or vases, they often put something inside if they have a large opening. So lots of xixia ceramics were discovered in the past, and we didn't pay enough attention to those ceramic products from non-Chinese states or kingdom or border kingdoms until recently. Because of archaeological discoveries, we can better identify the features of those local kings in Shisha kingdoms and distinguish lots of collections that entered to the museum world previously.
Yeah, I think the question maybe was referring to some Koroshti pots we've got at the British Library that were found with some Buddhist fragments inside. And do you know of any, I don't know, that's from me, that question, not from the audience. I was wondering if there are any similar items to that pot in Russian collections, for instance.
I think that's some kind of question. Yeah, maybe needs us to invest more time and investigation to find out more about what used to be inside and what kind of context they came from. Because often once the ceramic products entered the museum collection, they already left the original context. So I hope just in the future, we could do more excavations, especially in those lost cities on the Gobi deserts, because we have lots of sites destroyed quickly during the wars, especially during the Mongol invasions. And they pretty much wiped out everything in the city if people there resisted strongly. I think that's what happened to the ruler house of the Shisha kingdom, and the Mongols killed all descendants of the imperial family because they blamed the Shisha for the death of the Genghis Khan.
Well, yeah. Thank you. I've got also a question about the bronze Buddha that you showed us, dated to 338, asking approximately how tall it is.
That piece is about 41 centimeters, and please remember this is only a portion of the large assemblage of the niche, and that statue will sit it on a four-legged platform. So overall, we speculate the complete piece was about 60 some centimeters or 2 feet.
Thank you. We've got also someone saying, thank you for the marvelous survey. So the image of the deity in the 7th century with curly black hair, what distinguished it as specifically related to the Buddhist tradition?
Can you say it again? Which object?
I am not sure. It's referring to an image of a deity in the 7th century with curly black hair. If the person who's put the question wants to, maybe we can go back to your slides. I don't know if...
7th century. I think we have the mural fragment from Simsim Caves. It's dated to the 7th century. The reason why we date that piece to the 7th century is because during 640, that's some kind of important year to remember. The Tang Emperor sent troops to the west regions and conquered several small city-states in order to take better control of the Silk Road trade. So that's why we believe for the thriving Buddhist caves in that region, if they were commissioned by local people, the dates were probably dating to the 7th century when local agricultural local societies still have some kind of resource and power to commission large constructions. And that kind of style marked the Iranian or Western region styles and introduced by lots of painters from that region who served in the second half of 7th century at the court of Tang Empire and contributed to the apex of Tang art in the first of the 8th century. And this kind of situation in a sudden change in the year of 755 when the Anusan rebellion outbroke and forced the Tang Empire withdraw lots of troops from west regions. Then Uyghurs and other Tibetans, they rushed into the western regions and controlled lots of regions. That's the start of the decline of the Silk Road trade. That's why I want to put our objects in chronological order on the map, so you can have a better understanding of this kind of dynamic system, or this kind of large, vast network of the Silk Road trade, and consider it in some kind of large context to have a better understanding of this kind of rise and fall of the Silk Road trades.
Thank you. I think that the second half of the question was also asking, and I think because if it's the fragment from the Simsim Caves, whether it is quite small, what distinguished it as specifically related to the Buddhist tradition? But I guess you answered that partly already by saying it's also the context of that it came from as being Buddhist caves. But I don't know if you'd like to expand or.
Yeah, I think I particularly like this fragment. Even though it's small, it preserves some kind of key features of Buddhist art introduced from Iranian traditions. Let me see if I can really find out that piece again. Okay, yeah, so you can see this kind of very limited strokes of red colors on the top of the eyelid, next to the nose, over the lips, and close to the neck or the chin. Really highlight this kind of volume or this shadow on the surface to create some kind of three-dimensional feeling. And this kind of technique hasn't been used so much in traditional Chinese ink art, which emphasized the smooth of or calligraphic styles of brush strokes. So this is some kind of a new tradition introduced while the Silk Road to Chinese painting. And lots of Central Asian painters are known for their techniques of volume and shadow in exotic portraits. So that's why this fragment is important in terms of art historical merits, and it provided some kind of valuable example for us to understand this kind of Kucha style of Buddhist painting.
Thank you. We're very excited that it will also be incorporated to the IDP database. So then a question that relates to this item, and I think several others that you showed us, is does the moustache on deities such as Avalokiteshvara meant that there was an influence or transmission from Gandhara?
Right. Yeah, I think I can move to our 338 Buddha. I think you can see the mustache is some kind of interesting detail we used to identify influence from which reading, and you can see here in this Buddhist statue, this one as well, plus ours, and they all missing mustache. And this is some kind of Chinese adaptation, I believe, at that point, when the prototypes from Gandhara regions, most of them have mustache. But for Chinese artisan, they created those kind of Chinese smells and Chinese-like faces without mustache and straight hair. So something really very Chinese. And I believe this kind of adaptation really marked the specialty of this piece and its importance as a milestone of this kind of start of Chinese adaptation of some kind of imported foreign Buddhist icon as a way to make them better accepted among local believers. If during the earlier years, artisans used some kind of way to treat Buddha as some kind of minor deities, as suggested by the monetary. We know in the first half of 1st century, Chinese Buddhism started to think artistic and sculptural ways to make those Buddhist icons more preferred or favored by local believers.
Thank you very much. We have one last question. I'm not sure whether you'll be able to answer it because it's quite vast and it might be go beyond the remit of this talk. But it's did a lot of assets of China get destroyed by wars?
I think yeah, that's a large question, and I think like the examples I mentioned, those interesting Buddhist wall paintings from Buddhist caves cut away by the German archaeologist Van Eyck, all destroyed in World War II. And in China, if they were not removed from those caves, they were destroyed during the Cultural Revolutions. So I think lots of materials removed from the Silk Road expeditions by those early explorers ended up in India and other countries in Europe. So I think many of them, if not destroyed in wars, gradually started to deteriorate because of the lack of treatment. I believe those items in British Museum and British libraries received lots of good care, but some pieces not entered public collections, but ended up with private hands, suffered lots of tragic treatment, and ended up in auctions. So often we saw pieces with no good provenance, but we know they are objects from Dunhuang, ended up with some kind of broken pieces and creases on the surface. So I think maybe that's some kind of direction for the future of digital Dunhuang project in the future, that we can maybe digitally record those pieces scattered in the hands of private collectors that not received good attention. And from those auction sales, we can collect those information and have another category to preserve those treasures from Dunhuang and other sites along the Silk Roads.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I think we'll not be short of work to do. I think that's all we have time for tonight, but I want to, and I hope the audience will, I'm sure the audience will join me in thanking you very much for this wonderful presentation. And as this is the lecture to ending up our lecture series, I also wanted to thank Dr. Miki Morita for managing that project, Michelle Wong for co-hosting us with the British Library, and Anastasia Pinesci for helping organize the lecture series. So she's behind the you know, at the helm of everything, organizing it all. So I'm very grateful for her help. And the lectures have been recorded, and people who signed up or registered will be informed by email when they're made available on our YouTube channel. I think I see a few more comments saying thank you very much also, and for that suggestion of digitizing private collections. So yes.
Thank you, Melody.
Thank you very much
Thank you,
for
Michelle.
coming tonight and for that presentation.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your attention. And I hope you really enjoy this talk and this series.
Thank you very much. Have a good day all. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.